Welcome, everyone. Come on in. We're just going live on Facebook, making sure this is working. So glad that you are here. We're supposed to have a lot of people join us live today, which I'm thrilled about. So as you are coming in, just a big welcome from me. And as usual, drop into the chat where you're coming from. And tell me, what's your favorite get to know you question? So as you're joining, let us know who you are, where you're coming from, and your favorite get to know you question. I love questions, and today we're talking about relationships. And what I've learned along the way is if we don't have the vocabulary to ask meaningful questions, then sometimes we miss out on some beautiful opportunities for conversation. So people are dropping in. Hey, John.
Hey.
Welcome everyone. We got people coming in today, John, we got Flagstaff crew in the building. We got Saskatoon, Saskatchewan.
Played some hockey in Saskatchewan before.
I believe that. John's played a lot of hockey in a lot of places. Fun fact about John. Semi-pro hockey ref for a while.
I'm still paying for, my body's still paying for those years.
Oh, we got people coming in from Carmel, California. Welcome. I'm here from California today too. Katie ISD's in the building. Hi, Suba, welcome.
So I must have missed the beginning, Houston. Did you ask people to write their favorite question? I'm like seeing names and someone's like, what animal would you be? I'm like, hey, that's a really random thing to put in the chat.
Yeah, I asked people's favorite get to know you question.
Ooh.
Angie wrote one, and this is one of my favorites. What's something you've always wanted to do and have never done? That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Or what's something that you want to do but know you never will? Also a good question.
I like, if you didn't have to sleep, what would you do with that extra time?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that's just a wish, a dream.
I think that's how you already operate. People coming in from West Virginia, Wisconsin, Marysville, Washington. What's up, my friend? Oh, Jamal, how are you?
Jen from Chicago is here. Hey, Jen.
Nice. Massachusetts is in the building. Melanie dropped a great question to the chat. What do you need most right now?
Oof.
That's a great question. What do you need most right now? John, how would you answer that question? What do you need most right now?
Oh, there's lots of things. I might say, just right off the top of my head, some consistency of schedule again. With no childcare during COVID-19, it has created some really wonky schedules to keep things moving forward. So no more 3 a.m. start times. That's what I would like. That's what I need.
Consistency is key, and I know we haven't had a lot of it. Camille's coming in from Hawaii today, John. We got Hawaii in the building. We don't always get
great
Hawaii friends. That's pretty awesome. North Bend, Oregon's here. Anna, welcome.
Amanda's just up the road from me, Bonnie Lake.
Marilyn said, I'd really like to know what the 2021 school year is going to look like for us. I think we're all in the same boat there.
Should have gone with that.
Someone's coming in from Bogota. Our friends from Colombia in the building, which I love. Lizzie's here from Katie ISD. Philadelphia's here. Oh,
Principal Wes Canoyer is here. Hey, Wes, who was on our Whole Child Virtual Summit with his students. Been on a podcast with us. Hey, Wes. I like it. Wes said the speed dating activity is a great way to facilitate whole staff interaction and connections. You got to make sure that you maybe clarify
You
know what our staff does.
We have an activity called speed friending. Speed friending is what we call it. Tony's in the building, principal from Flagstaff High School. Who is your favorite motivational speaker? Tony, I hope you have an answer to that, and I hope my name is involved somewhere. Literally, true story, the best introduction I've ever had in a school building comes from Tony Cohen, principal at Flagstaff High School. He literally had a Make Kindness Normal shirt underneath a white button down, and he tore off the button down to reveal the message underneath. It was epic. He also can do backflips. The man is awesome.
All right, man.
So beautiful. Absolutely. We got over 400 people live here today. So grateful to have you here. I know a lot of people have been looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to today because we know the critical nature of what it's going to look like when we return. How do you frame that in your mind, John, coming back to school in the fall? What are some paradigms or some thoughts that stand out to you?
Yeah, first of all, I was like, I might have you rephrase that. It's like I was looking at, I think it was Sarah that said like, how can we get a list of all these great questions? And I'm like, you're going to have to go through that chat and copy and paste, my friend, because there was a lot of good ones. I think I heard you on that, Hugh. I think the big paradigm shift here is this. It's, that we are not in what we are used to. We all know that. A worldwide pandemic can do that, right? All of the different things that right now are going on in our world, it kind of feels like there can't be one more thing, right? And the collective grief and trauma that our students and staff, and that's important to note, are coming back from, a way that I have been hearing people articulate it is, if we're used to 80% of the students on average are really in that tier 1 level, which is what we're doing on a daily basis, right? Through our tier 1 foundational supports is enough. And then there are some who are in need of tier 2 supports, right? And then there are a few who are in need of maybe tier 3 supports. What we are used to that would usually maybe be more tier 2 or tier 3 is really now tier 1. That is one way that I've been hearing people talk about it, and I agree with, and the way that we need to view it. The other would be, if I'm used to, as a classroom teacher, being intentional with the first 1 to 2 weeks of like the school year to build really strong like classroom culture and a climate to really, do that upfront work that then I can keep coming back to. If I think that that's what it's going to take now, I am really, really mistaken. And I know that people know this that are with us today, that we really have to be intentional with the before, right? As we start, and then the longer run, right? We're not talking about 1 to 2 weeks. What about 4, 5, 6 weeks and beyond? And that is what really has brought together this webinar and the trainings that we're going to be doing in July and August.
And we know that people are, as someone dropped into the chat, what is it going to look like this year? We're, in many ways, we are off the grid. We are off the traditional map and trajectory. So how do we handle this? And I know that comes with a lot of academic and curricular type questions, and even just some logistical things that schools are navigating. But at Character Strong, our whole purpose, our whole work is to help create a more loving world through education. And we believe foundationally that this work is all about relationships. And we know more than ever coming back, that's going to be true. So our hope, our goal is to provide you with some of those tools. So that can be hopefully one less thing that you have to navigate yourself, that we can provide you a framework, or as it were, a road map to figure out how to navigate this fall. So this is a roadmap we've started to build. Looks something like this, and it's going to be a circuitous and challenging and hopefully purposeful road that we get to walk together. And my goal today is to sort of navigate how this roadmap sort of operates in our brain, give you a couple of practical ideas that live in a couple of these different categories along the way, and then spend a little time at the end talking about actually how we built this roadmap. Because I think one of the best things that we could hopefully provide for you today is to think about how we think about this work, so that hopefully it deepens the way that you think about this work if it's helpful. So let's start right here. One of the things, as John alluded to, that's an important reframe is that students aren't the only ones coming back in the fall who are navigating trauma. Certainly it is the educators, it is everyone who's involved. Any touch point in education has had a lot of their world upended, which means before we're ever fully capable of taking care of the young people that we serve, we have to navigate stress thoughtfully, cultivate our own coping skills, build up our own resilience, and sort of, we think about that idea, right, of well-being or wellness. What does it look like to take care of ourselves as educators really effectively? And I know that's sort of one of those narratives that gets put out a lot to educators. And I think for a long time, maybe educators would push it off to the side because there is a lot of work to do. But I think more than ever, being really intentional about how we take care of ourselves as educators is going to be a really critical ingredient. And that starts as soon as possible, John, right? Like today, what can we begin doing to fill up our own cups? To give you a little context of how this map works, we built it with a little bit of the Google Maps aesthetic in mind. So what you'll notice in the upper right is a little map icon. We can use that throughout today's presentation. And the map itself, you can use that to always go back to the main map that you just saw a second ago, right here. So if I click here on Wellbeing Workouts, you'll notice there's a couple of different options. Challenges that we want to offer up to educators to think about what well-being looks like leading up to this school year. And there's lots of different categories of wellness that we know are going to be important to take care of yourself, including sleep, movement and exercise, nutrition. But here's a couple of ideas, if you were to navigate this map, of what we think this could look like in a very practical way. So one of the things, for example, that we've learned in doing a lot of our in-building professional development and our regional trainings, so often we hear that narrative. I think, John, you just told the story the other day of a woman who, when we were doing PD, she was like, I've been in education for 35 years, and this 3 hours with my staff, I've gotten to know them better in just this 3 hours and in 35 years of education before.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually 90 minutes, and it was both exciting and it was sad, right? Because it's like 90 minutes of intentional beginning of a full day professional development of like getting staff to connect with each other. And she's like literally bouncing on her way to the like snack table or bathroom, I don't know, on the first break. And I'll never forget her sharing that. And I was like, one, really excited that she said it, but I was like, wait a minute, 35 years, 90 minutes, and you feel closer to them now? And it's like, but having been in the classroom for 10 years, that makes a lot of sense. At the high school level, there are people that I pass by every single day, and I know less about them than I might know in 60 minutes of intentional connection with a group that we met on a Saturday in California, right? And so I think it's an incredibly important piece that sometimes gets ignored because we think it's this like thing on the side. You know, that's the fluff. And I think that we are starting to realize more than ever that it's not the fluff.
Absolutely. So here's what one of the practices look like to make sure that we're continuing to cultivate those meaningful relationships. Here's one of the first challenges we would offer. We call it know well. Let's make sure we get to know a few things about each other. So over the course of this summer, what if you started an email thread or put it into your group remind chat or your Facebook group or wherever it is that you connect as a staff, maybe even have a few online PD days at the end of this year or going into the next. Here'd be one opportunity to share with your fellow staff members just 5 fun facts based on these prompts. One thing about your favorite hobby, one thing about your family, about your time as an educator, one thing about a phase, a quote unquote phase or a fad that you went through, and one thing that might surprise people. In fact, go ahead and drop into the chat the answer to one of those questions. I would love to know how you would respond to one of those questions. And it's super fun to be able to, even in the chat, look at, I know not everyone knows who everyone is here, but even just to see some things being shared. For example, Deborah says, I am in the movie Remember the Titans.
What?
That's awesome.
Deborah, that is awesome.
A different Deborah says, I have changed laws in 2 states.
Okay. Deborah's for the win.
Aaron says, I had a pet possum named Fellow. That's incredible.
This is awesome.
Angie, I went through a Duran Duran fan phase. It'd be interesting to know how deep of a fan, like full groupie fan. How many shows have you been to? Houston, Nike Tam says, I read 118 books in 2019.
Oh my goodness. I think I did too, but they were to my 5-year-old and they took less than 5 minutes to read each time. Houston, what would you say to this one? What's one thing that might surprise people if you had to answer that?
About me?
Yeah.
I think one of the surprise, I'll give you 2 sort of categories. One on the like more personal side. I slept in my parents' room until I was 12 because I was really scared of the dark. I've always had like this like weird paranoia and had a really hard time sleeping alone. So that's my embarrassing fun fact that might surprise people. The other one that might surprise people that I put in my bio is that I was once invited to play on the junior varsity national laser tag team. Very good at laser tag.
I thought for years you were joking, and then I found out that was true.
What's a phase that you went through, John?
Oh, real quick. Is it Landon? I think it's Landon or London. Said he threw up in the White House Blue Room. This is the best. We should just do a webinar where we ask questions and people get to share. That is awesome. What were you saying? What's a phase that I went through?
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Like the skateboard phase, you know, not that's not a phase for everybody, but I was like, I wanted to be a skater. like when I was growing up, and the neighbor kid, it was when the neighbor kid, his family like made a ramp. It wasn't like a huge ramp, but it was a ramp. And I kid you not, it was months of trying to learn how to like drop into that ramp. So many skin knees. Like I think my skateboard phase went away when I couldn't handle it anymore. Too many bonked heads and bruised knees. But yeah, I had that phase.
Yeah, I tried to drop in one time at a skate park on a bike and went head over handlebars, concrete to teeth, and I said,
Nope.
This is the end of my phase. This
done.
is the phase began and ended right there."
Yeah.
Some amazing things come into the chat, and what a gift, right? That reminder that even a simple prompt can create so much connection. Bindi shared that she was a refugee during the expulsion of Asians in the 70s by the dictator Idi Amin, which is profound. You have everything from that to someone who said Kristen said when she got married, she forgot to bring the rings to their ceremony. Critical ingredient, I guess. Love is the most important ingredient.
Okay,
So
this has got to transition. As Lacey said, I rapped, in quote, she put in quote, "Tricky Tricky, song about a gold digger" by Lou Bega at the innocent age of 10 in front of 200 people.
it's pretty epic. We have quite a crowd here today.
Yes.
What a good mix of humans. The whole point is this: we all know we crave connection, but if we're not given a prompt or the time, sometimes we miss opportunities to connect in this way. And we always find that the more specific that prompt, right, the more meaningful or interesting it can be, as opposed to just 5 fun facts. Providing that actual specificity actually allows people to be more creative. When we just offer 5 fun facts, sometimes people have a really hard time. They're like, I don't know if I'm fun. I think that to myself all the time. But as soon as you give targets, it allows people to amplify their own thinking process. What about another well-being workout? How about support well? Here's a practical strategy. Do a give and take survey by sharing with your staff one thing you can give. Maybe it's a listening ear, some good music playlists, baked goods, some time to mentor a younger staff member, and one thing that you need help with this year. Accountability with blank, a goal that you have or something that you're working towards. Maybe you need some help with virtual assistance if you're in an online learning situation and that feels really new or scary to you. Or maybe you just feel overwhelmed and you want to ask for help with like some weekly encouragement. The premise here would be just create like a little Google form and build a spreadsheet where everyone puts out a give and a take. And then you can see if you work together, wouldn't it be cool as the year gets started, if through the collective sort of energy of your staff, you were able to meet everyone's need in some way, even if it's something small, silly, being able to meet that need. So you get the idea. Each of these on this menu have different challenges, have different dares, just opportunities to think about what wellness looks like leading up to the beginning of the school year. And we don't want it to be overwhelming, so created about 7 here, which means you could take 1 or 2 at a time over the course of over the summer, so that when you return to school, you're feeling rejuvenated and well. Once again, click in the upper right here, which takes us back to the roadmap. So we think about well-being for ourselves, and then we think about that 2 weeks leading up to the school year. And as you can imagine, we use that 2-week benchmark because we know that 2 weeks leading up to any substantial break at a school is oftentimes where we see discipline increase. I think that 2-week mark starts to make it feel real that we're returning to something. And we know for a lot of students and for staff, probably at that 2 weeks mark before we start school, increased anxiety or excitement or fear or confusion, knowing that a lot of us are returning with a lot of new normals. Maybe we're returning in a virtual learning environment in the fall that feels totally new and scary. Whatever it is, how do we think about that 2-week sprint? What are we going to do to really double down and put a focus to build up our resilience and our connections during that time? So, John, one of the things that I love that you talk about and think through is this idea, knowing that your role was at the district office. You were program administrator for the whole child. So you were thinking often through that systems lens, tier 1 lens. And you talk a lot about this idea of a true tier 1. What do you mean when you say that?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times what you will see when schools start to get serious about strengthening the tier one, right? Or they're really digging into MTSS, and there's a question that I'll answer that was in the chat earlier related to that. But they start to get kind of from the systems level, from like the school-wide level to the student level, some things in place. From the staff level, like real intentional adult relational practices happening from the staff to student level. But then they kind of like stop. It's not that the work stops, but the intentionality of how do we make something true, like tier one, it kind of stops at that point. And I always say, that's not a true tier one. A true tier one would be, what if we could really get intentional at increasing the student to student piece, the student to staff piece, the student to family piece? And not that that's the only one, but that we start thinking through those different lenses. That is a true tier one, because all of that is a part of those foundational supports, and can really leverage this work moving forward. So that's a different way for many of looking at it.
Absolutely. And it was sort of the frame that we use to think through a lot of these ideas. You'll notice in the next section that we start to really break down all those potential relational dynamics. But the 2 weeks leading up, what are we doing as a staff to really serve our students and families? So for each of these categories, we have 4 challenges, which would roughly equate to like 2 a week. We do 2 things each week at minimum to put a focus on relationships. So here's an idea. We see you. Send a 3 to 4 question survey to do a quote unquote temperature check. One of the things that we believe in at Character Strong, an emotional check-in, and some questions on that temperature check could be, how are you on a scale of 1 to 5, leading back up to school? What is one thing you're grateful for right now? What is one thing that's challenging to you right now? And what's one thing that you want me as your educator, your teacher, your counselor to know as we come back to school? Wouldn't it be cool if every homeroom or advisory or first period teacher sent this out to their students to get that emotional snapshot, so that you really had all your bases covered in terms of everyone on the campus coming back with at least one adult who has a sense of how the student's doing, what they're grateful for, what's challenging them, and then that opportunity to share something that they want us to know as they're returning.
And Houston,
this is a big one.
They're already thinking correctly, right? They're in the chat immediately when you show it, then someone says, this could be done and sent to teachers as well. Boom.
Yep.
Right? This is what it is all about, right? And even a way to even role model the work, and will be a part of even our roadmap. But that's what we need ideas. And when we share ideas, then we get other ideas going. And I love that the immediate thought there is that this works not just for students, it's also what are we doing with staff?
Absolutely. So that staff to student piece, obviously a huge relational piece. And as people are sharing, like, yeah, brainstorm how this looks like in those other dynamics, staff to staff. What about staff to family? Even on a practical level, right? The reminder of how much many families have taken on, that traditionally they have that opportunity to use school as a place of learning, and for many people, childcare and the upending of people's schedules. So how thoughtful or cool would it be if we used our school's marquee, digitally or physically, to put out a thank you note to families for all they've done to navigate the past few months, to maintain that partnership, really this communal partnership, that sense that this is truly the work of a village and not just one entity or another, to partner with our families. Just a simple message of gratitude. And you'll notice over here on the side that for each of these sort of relational dynamics, there'll be multiple challenges. So our gratitude is just one of them, but there's lots of other things that the roadmap will include as well. So that's that 2-week sprint, thinking about how we return thoughtfully. But we know that the energy, hopefully, right, we want that sort of like crescendo. We're building to that first day back. So that day before is going to be really critical. What do we do to think about this as thoughtfully as possible and crescendo to a return, whether that's in person or virtual? I want to make sure that that's clear, that this roadmap is designed to support either or any of the situation that you're going to find yourself in. Staff to staff, right? You'll start to notice on the side here, we've gone even deeper. That 2-week sprint is a little bit less of those multiple relationship dynamics, but this day before, we're starting to get as many of that quote unquote true tier one as we can engaged in this work. So what are we doing staff to staff? Well, here's an idea. Build a collaborative playlist on YouTube or Spotify that represents your entire staff by having each person submit one song. Use the playlist throughout the first day of school and use it as a relational guessing game. Maybe this is just going on between the staff behind the scenes. People are playing music or it's getting sent out throughout the day. And the goal is to see if you can guess who submitted each song that you hear throughout the day. One of my favorite things, I actually pulled this idea, John, from the camp that you and I first met at, the leadership camp thing. As a counselor, we would bring our favorite song. No one else would know it. It would get put on a CD, and the last night we would lay out under the stars. We'd listen to the songs, and we would try to guess who chose what. One of my favorite memories at camp. Such a special thing to give that gift of music.
It literally was the thing I was thinking when you started to share. That is crazy that you shared that. What I love about it is it becomes also a team building thing. When you think about the multiple usages and positives of doing something like this, I still remember people, and this is 20 years ago, and I remember their song.
Yep.
And so there's that connection piece that even staff to staff that goes beyond just that it's a playlist outside of school and inside. This is a great idea. I love it.
Yeah, and to get you started, Character Strong does have a Spotify playlist. So in the roadmap, I've linked to our playlist, which is well curated. It's a good one. It's one of my favorites. There's a lot of dynamics here that we could touch on, but I think sometimes we forget about all those little relational dynamics that can exist. What about our custodial staff? What about our secretariat? What about student leaders? Where else can we get? How about the student to staff dynamic? What are we doing to start to encourage students as they're coming back to think about that relational dynamic towards the staff? So here's a simple, again, those practical prompts that potentially put people into action. Send an email to your teachers for the year that includes these 3 ingredients: why you appreciate them, what you're excited about for this year, how are you going to do your best to show up for them? How cool would it be if teachers started to receive some emails from their students with that just little note of encouragement, that little relational one-off? And one of the things when it comes to challenges like this, John, we always have this there's sort of that natural question of well, what if students don't do it? How do you respond to that dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let someone else respond to it. Recently, it was an educator, I think out of Oregon, and they were saying, you know what did it for me when it came to because we were talking about character dares and different things for staff and students, and she said, because I was always really kind of skeptical about, well, what if not everybody's into it, and it's I think there's a lot of people that maybe think that way, and I remember she said, what changed for me was when I had a colleague who challenged me on that. And she said, my colleague said, well, what if 30% actually did it? What if 30%, I think at the time she's talking about a staff character dare. What if 30% of the staff actually took us up on that challenge that week? And then it turned into, what if 30% of our students, what if even 20% of our students, the week that was actually given, actually did it that week? What do you think would happen to our overarching climate and culture? What impact do you think it would have? And then she took it a step further and she said, and then I realized it's not always about doing it that week. It's not always about being coming across as being really into it. She said, we're in the seed planting business. And it may be for a month down the road or 3 months down the road where an idea clicks and then another one comes, because we continue to have a way of giving different ideas, and we need ideas to get other ones started. So I thought it was pretty powerful. It was a great reminder. And it was coming from someone who said, my initial thought was negative. My initial thought was skeptical, but here's what did it for me. I also think there's power in that, breaking it down, verbally processing, that it took a colleague. It took a colleague to call out and say, no, this is what we're about. What if, right? And it's huh. And that's what changed it for. And sometimes we need to fight for that relational work, right?
Yeah.
Staff to staff.
Absolutely. Not always about fidelity of execution, but just the offering ideas increases the likelihood of the relational or pro-social behaviors that we want to see.
Well, and even just to start, and I think this is powerful. I'll end on this part here, because someone just said, thank you for addressing the whole non-participatory situations, because they do come up a lot. I mean, I did this work for a decade at the high school level, which is one of the hardest places to get traction. And I will tell you that the most powerful stories of change came from students. Every single time, 100% of the time almost, I would say that the most powerful examples of change came from students who early on, if you would have asked me, I would have said they were not into it. They didn't look like they were participating every week, but it doesn't mean that they're not listening. We always say, trust the process. And that process happening regularly and then getting the opportunity to be exposed to it doesn't mean that at some point down the road, they're not going to engage in it or are not doing it on the side. They just might not be the one looking for the recognition. in doing it.
That's right. Good reframe. That's the day before, and then we get to this big part of the map, that first day back, which we know is going to be a unique challenge, in many ways an unprecedented challenge as we return. So what do we do to be intentional there? Well, we return to all those different dynamics, and how do we support these from a relational perspective? What are our student leaders doing? Well, here's one option. Make sure your student leader's job is to make sure that no one has to open their own door. We're talking all doors: classroom door, front door, cafeteria door. If you are near a door, you are opening it for someone else and smiling, saying hello. So just that simple act of service, that act of greeting people. And if you're virtual, well, guess what? You can still open doors. It just might look a little different. Maybe you just intentionally reach out to your teachers so that you show up to class a few minutes early, especially that first class. And wouldn't it be cool if, like, you on video, if you had the capacity to do it, on video, you're like standing in front of a door and you're like opening it up, right? Like, hey, welcome, we're really glad you're here. And just that simple idea of having something that feels even reminiscent of being in a physical space can be a really cool, intentional move.
Yeah, Houston, let me add one thing here too, because there's a great comment in the chat that could be even taken a couple of ways, but it's solid. It says, please don't just include your traditional student leaders, dig deeper. Rule of thumb: student participation in decision-making must mirror the demographics of the school. Look for students who haven't been given the opportunities to learn and experience being in leadership in their school. And I hope that, and that could be taken one of two ways. It could be at us right now to respond to it. Also could be to everybody who's like listening. Hey, as a challenge, don't forget, I think there's a couple of things to unpack there. One, what is your definition of a student leader, right? That's what people have to identify within their school. Component 4 of our theory of change is the student leadership component, but it's defined this way. What if we were to take a smaller group of students, so not tier 1, but ideally who are representative of your student population, which means it can't just be the 5 that got elected by popular vote. Right. So 1, is your leadership program exclusive or is it open? Do more students have an opportunity? Is the only way for me to get involved after school or before school? Because that's not equitable. Are there opportunities within the even given day for students to participate? And do they all even know the message that you are all leaders? Because we would define leadership as influence, and everybody in your building influences. It's not a question of whether you're influencing, it's just a question of whether it's good or bad, effective or ineffective, right? But we all are leading. So love that comment, and we are right with you on that. Is your student leadership program representative of your student population?
Absolutely. And then how do you leverage that representative group, as someone mentioned in the chat, peer influencers, who has a voice amongst their peers? That's the whole point. How do you take that representative group, train them deeper on the work so that they can amplify those pro-social behaviors because they've been given opportunities to practice and support to do so? So this student leaders is that more representative group to make sure that we're giving that opportunity to as many people as possible. What else does this look like on the first day? Well, how about custodial? What can we do to make sure that the custodial staff is engaged in that relational work as well? What if they were to write positive messages on the bathroom mirrors? Sometimes that's a student leadership job, and then the custodians end up being the ones who have to clean it up. That's not how that should work. What if the custodians get to have ownership over that message, share their favorite quotes or moments or memories or words of encouragement, and let staff and students know that they're excited to have them back? If you're virtual, don't worry about it. We got you there. What if you empower the custodians to either go take a picture of a mirror at the school, or you can just use a stock photo. I found this one online and I used a handwritten font. So you could have the custodians send an email out to students and staff with a little template like this. Welcome back. We've missed you, even your messes. Just know we've always got your back, the custodial crew. Wouldn't it be cool to give them the opportunity to be a part of that relational work, even if you're not back in a physical campus? So that first day obviously has a lot of different dynamics to think about, and the goal here with all these is always just to be bite-sized, right? It's something that's manageable, but an offer that we're creating so we encourage the types of relational behaviors that we want to see. But the first day, as John mentioned, is not the only day that we have to keep a focus on relationships. What does it look like to maintain this, to persist this over time? Well, let's talk about the first 2 weeks of school. When thinking through the first 2 weeks, we have to think about this on a daily basis. That's our goal, is to make sure that we're thinking about this every single day that we have students in our classrooms, students in our schools, We have to be connecting and making sure that we're doing that relational work. And it doesn't always have to be super complicated for it to be powerful. What about on day one? In fact, this comes from our Staff Character Dare series with a little bit of amplification here. We believe, we always say, leadership lesson number one, relationship lesson number one, names are important. You know, there are some students that will go their entire educational career and not have their names pronounced right on the first day of school. Or they're consistently called something that isn't actually their preferred name. So what if on day one, we have students write out their preferred name phonetically or record it on a phone, audio note, or video, so you can practice getting it right. You can read it right on the first day. If you have it recorded, we've heard lots of teachers will record names so they can hear it in the student's voice or see the student and match it to their name so they can work on getting those names faster earlier in the year. And then how cool would it be if in a given classroom, you had the opportunity to learn more about the story of the person's name, right? An opportunity to think about even just this idea of, you know, some people are talking about and having questions right now around how are we going to address some of the racial conversations as we come back. And at Character Strong, we believe it is not an add-on. It is not something that's like, okay, here's 3 lessons on racial justice in the country. That's not how this work gets done. It has to be woven into the fabric of everything that we do. So the premise of learning people's names, of being thoughtful in how you pronounce them, of historicizing people's names and understanding a bit more where they come from is just a very small first seed in the longer term woven in work that's required to think about this and do that work thoughtfully. Day 1, day 2, day 3, how do we keep this momentum moving forward? How do we continue to persist with that relational work? Well, what if on day 3, we played a round of what we call the hot seat, where you as the educator get to choose what number question you get asked, and then you spend time answering 2 or 3 questions. Now, of course, you can use this in lots of ways. If your students are up for it, have a few of them get in the hot seat as well. So John, why don't we role model what this looks like if I pull up the hot seat? In the chat, would someone offer what number question you want John to answer?
As they're doing that too, Houston, I think we should, like, you know, even going to this, I think, you know, and I used to even think this way, like that I'm going to learn the names, you know, and I think maybe a more specific would be I'm going to learn it, you know, without having to like look, right, without having to go within a certain amount of time. You know, I had about 200 students every semester that turned over at semester at the high school level, and having certain sets of tools, which someone asked, like, how do we do this with 6 feet apart? Almost any given name game you could do while still being 6 feet apart if you have the space to do it, and you can move to different areas, and we provide schools a lot of those resources. But I just think about the idea of we can't wait. Like, I need to get it on day 1. I need to get it on that first moment, because even a student having to deal with being mispronounced for the first week or first 2 weeks at the high school level, that's been happening for years, right? As I'm sure that you noted there. And it's like, no, our expectation should be from the first moment I get it. And that's why we can use something like that note card or something to get it right, or at least really, really close, that shows that that effort's there. I think we need to change our paradigm in some cases there.
I love that. Couldn't agree more. Hey, Marcy says question 4 or 8. That's the most recent one I saw. John, which one do you want to go with, 4 or 8?
Well, I've seen 8 at multiple trainings now that we've been leading. So I'm going to go 4 just because I don't know what's underneath it. Not that I'm scared of 8. Not at all.
This is a good one. John, if you weren't living in the current place you're in and doing the current work you do, what would you be up to right now?
Probably the same thing. I would just be doing it in a new place.
No, you can't be doing the same work.
Okay. If you weren't living in the current place you're in and doing the current work you do, what would you be up to right now? You know what? I would be hanging out with my son, paying more attention to my wife, which needs to happen daily because the work can be a lot. And so I would be pushing more into my family, more into the relationships that matter most. And this is reminding me to not wait till that time.
That's a good answer. Would you also be, like, in your parallel life, would you be a hockey player? Like, if you had a different trajectory altogether?
Now that I've actually been able to experience like purposeful work, no. Like there would be a time where I would say like, yeah, hockey, absolutely. But like now, no, it'd be another angle of purposeful work. It's just so much better than even the sport that I love so much. So no, which is like, that's a big deal that I just said
I know. I like that.
that.
Shot.
Sandy, by the way, Sandy, thank you for the encouragement there. It's hard to balance all the relationships. Yes. Let's do a little
Okay,
counseling session for John.
John, which one do you want me to answer?
Yeah, let's see, one that I haven't seen yet. I don't think that I have seen 5 or 6. Let's go 6.
6. What's one piece of advice that has stuck with you? How have you used it in your life? I'll give you one from each of my parents. My mom's eternal life lesson is hug like you mean it, which I have learned and translated over time to understand that we don't always know when we're going to get the last opportunity to be with people, to connect with people. So make sure that every hug, every I love you, every moment of connection is present and authentic. And on a higher level, if we're not going to be thoughtful or purposeful or meaningful in anything that we do, why do it? So hug like you mean it is my mom's life lesson. My dad's is girls like a guy who can dance. And I've taken that to heart, and dancing is my favorite hobby. I've been dancing since I was 3 or 4 years old, and very much love to dance still. Good advice, Dad. Those are my
That's
2.
good. That's so good. Actually, I have seen that question, so I got to remember it's 5 that I was.
Suba says, do we get to see a sample? Yeah, if you actually, you know what? Today, this is good to know. Today at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we have our I think it's our 4th Twitter chat, #CSChat. If you want to join it today, I say this, Suba, who asked this in the chat, 4 p.m. PST at character. We do a unique Twitter chat. It's a 17-minute, really tight, 3 questions. The first question is relational. The second question is practical. The third question comes in from a guest. And it's 17 minutes. It happens really fast. We try to keep it short so it's not this lingering thing. And the first CS chat, if you go back a little ways, you'll see that my first answer to a first ever question from our CS chat is a video of me dancing. So Suba, if you want to find this, if you're really motivated,
where are you going with this?
if you really want to find it, there is a video of me dancing online.
And if you stay till the very end of this, I will tell you the story of an embarrassing moment of Houston dancing before he conducted a middle school assembly once. And so I'll share that at the end of this webinar.
We're going to cut this webinar short. Suba's into it. She's going to go find it. I love that. All right, let me jump to the final few slides here, which sort of helps us unpack how did we build this. As I mentioned before, thinking about the way we think about this stuff, hopefully is a helpful practice for you all. But we use something that we call intersectional thinking, which is basically just like a model for your brain to amplify creativity. Sometimes we just say we need to be better at relationships, or we got to go back to school with a focus on relationships. That concept is so massive and sprawling that it actually reduces our capacity to make it targeted or thoughtful or specific. So one of the ironic concepts in creativity is that constraint actually amplifies creativity. So what if we were to get more specific with the ask? What does it look like to be more relational with certain people in our schools as we come back in the fall? That's step 1. So just using that as a brainstorming, it's like, what does it look like to be more relational with our students, our staff? What does it look like to put a focus on our relationships with our paraprofessionals, our transportation department, our custodial staff, community partnerships, our student leaders? It starts to change the frame of the question. But here's where it gets good, and here's why we call it intersectional thinking. What if we were to add an additional circle, an additional category? We have to think about relationships, not just on that first day, but what if we got really specific? What about 4 weeks out? What does that look like? What kind of relationships should we be cultivating 4 weeks out? Which is probably different than the relationships we're cultivating 1 week out. and different than the relationships we're cultivating 3 weeks in, 1 month in, for our first homecoming back, for the sports season, which is going to look different, for the fall play, which is going to look different. All these different categories of time when they normally occur, relationship building looks different at those different timelines. So intersectional thinking prompts us to bring the two together. What does it look like 4 weeks out to put a focus on that staff to staff relationship? What does it look like the day before school to put a focus on our transportation staff relationally, our custodial, our cafeterial staff, right? And those questions start to amplify or deepen the specificity of the action. And when it comes to relationship building, when it comes to kindness or generosity, we say that specificity deepens meaning. Specificity drives action. The more specific it is, the more you reduce the burden or friction of thinking in people's minds as we're trying to come up with the ideas. And the more specific it is, typically the more meaningful it is to the recipient, right? It's the difference between receiving a handwritten card, or I just saw this funny post on social media where Home Depot sent out all their employees a metal mug that just had a wrap around it that was just printed off that said, "Thank you for your hard work during this time." And the person posted being like, "Oh, thanks for this recognition," which is like, right? It's like mass-produced recognition, mass-produced relationships can be a nice gesture, but very rarely is it deeply impactful. So what if we got even more specific? What if we started asking ourselves, how do we combine people and time with the specificity of love languages? The love languages, Dr. Gary Chapman's famous book, there are 5 ways to give and receive love: acts of service, gifts, physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time. Yeah, physical touch looks different now. But the premise being this: how do we use that framework, right? So what if we were to combine all 3 of these? And here's a sample question that organizationally we start to ask ourselves. What does it look like to serve our front office staff 1 week into the school year with an act of service? The answer to that question is very different than how do we put a focus on relationships when we come back to school? And that specificity is going to be really important as you create your own ideas. Now, a lot of people have questions about how to get access to this roadmap. Here's our promise to you. Number 1, we'll send out a recording of today's webinar. Number 2, attached to that recording, we will send a PDF that includes a number of the slides, not all the slides from today, but a number of the slides with a couple of our most practical favorite ideas that we shared from today. But the real good stuff that we are really excited about is we've been doing these online trainings for school culture, and we decided to create a brand new one, knowing the natural challenges that we have coming back in the fall. So on July 23rd and August 22nd, we will be hosting a 1-day training that's 5 hours long that digs into the entirety of this roadmap, and we'll have it totally filled in for you. And I don't know if you noticed, but this is operating inside of Google Slides. So if I were to exit out of this, what you'll see here is this opportunity to have these Google Slides. And the whole idea, and the reason I say that to you, is at this Relaunching Relationally roadmap training, we are going to create a copy of those Google Slides so that you can take this template for yourself, replicate it in your building, so that you can use the ideas that we've created for the entirety of the roadmap. But you can also, as you think through it with your staff, you can brainstorm your own ideas, and you can replace ours with yours, or add layers or add categories, whatever's going to serve, update it each year as things change or grow for you, because this is certainly not just a one-off experience. Relationships are always important. And as such, we wanted to provide tools to make it worth your while and helpful in the long run. You'll notice this one says $99 per person. There's an early bird discount, which makes that $79 per person. And these trainings have been awesome over the past 4 months, John. I think we've trained 2,500 people in our school culture training, which is different than this. And it's been such a gift to connect with educators from all around the world. If you have a bigger group from a school, we also work with entire schools. We've had entire buildings show up to our trainings, or entire districts. So if you're trying to send an entire building or district, let us know. We can get you some district-wide pricing. People are asking, do we just attend one or both? You get to choose which date is best for you. So it's
Yeah,
just a 1-day training, and you get to choose the one that works for you.
yeah, some people too, there's a couple in there. I love the honesty as well as also the question. So someone said, is there one sooner? Because we start August 3rd. And one of the things we talked about in terms of the planning is once someone registers, then that we can get it, some of the resources sent sooner. So you can begin your planning yet still attend where we do the walkthrough and train on it. And I do appreciate when people are like, oh, there's a cost. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of time and effort that went in putting this together. And it takes a lot to put stuff like this together and to keep this work moving forward. So absolutely, but talk to us in terms of your school. If there's a group that you want, we always work with our schools. And we also put out an incredible amount of free content through lots of webinars, including last week with Dr. Michelle Borba. So please do reach out, and we'd love to support our schools. So thank you for all of those comments and questions that were coming in.
Absolutely. People are asking about specific discounts or the size of group. Drop us a note. In fact, you can send us an email. Krista, our team member, will put an email into the chat right now where you can ask any of those questions. And people are asking, where can we find the CS music playlist? That's a good question. We will send that in the follow-up resources from today's webinar, Pamela. I got you. Music's my love language, so I'm sending that to you. People are asking which stakeholders would be good to have at this training. John, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, well, I think anybody could find value. This is some of our trainings. It's more of like kind of your school-wide team. And if you're looking at it through that lens, because not everybody, even though I think this one is more like when it comes to stakeholders, could be anybody, like any classroom teacher, any administrator, counselor could find value. But if you're looking at it through more of a team lens, I think the key stakeholders should be representative of your staff. So in the ideal setting, you have an administrator represented, you have a counselor, you've got a certificated staff represented, you've got classified staff, SPED represented. In an ideal setting, if it was like we just want a core team that's representative of our staff, you could even bring a parent, right? That could be a part of that. So from that lens, and some schools have more active parent groups, but I think this would be more of a training that anybody could find value from and be trained on.
People are asking some great questions. If we're not a character strong school, quote unquote, would it be valuable? Absolutely. We built this to be designed to be relational for any campus as you're coming back. That said, if you are a character strong school, there will be some custom parts of the map which integrate our work into that map. So if you have our on-demand PD, for example, or are using our advisory curriculum or purposeful people or leadership, we will have touch points to weave that map together with our work. But you do not have to be a character strong school to attend.
Yeah, and that's a great question too, because sometimes introduction to character strong, we in the past we've created when we are in person what we call like the first 48, which is a slide deck that gives relational activities for like period by period for the first 48 hours. And any school can find value from that, right? You don't have to be teaching the character strong lessons to be able to implement that. And I think the roadmap's similar. Someone said there was one that was just more about like, I think the question for me was more around like getting approval from the school. Talk to us on that in regards to like working with you on if you feel like things are slow for your district, we can work with you on that. It's better to reach out. We deal with a lot of different situations when it comes to that.
Absolutely. Krista, our team member, is going to drop a link to register for this training. And as John said, there's lots of ways to handle it. We want you there. So we will work with you to make sure that it is possible. You'll see in the link that Krista will drop into the chat, you'll see when that early bird discount expires. So you'll have some time to sign up for that. Someone asked about the Michelle Borba webinar. All of our past webinars are on our site under resources. And that one with Dr. Michelle Borba last week had over 700 people participate. She's amazing. That's a free webinar that we did with her. She's incredible. She's written 25 books and been on the Today Show 150 times. And so if you want to learn more about empathy and some of her frames, that's amazing. Someone asked about it being recorded, or could we access the materials earlier? Yeah, we will. If you're not able to make it on one of these 2 days, as John mentioned, if you sign up for it, we will pass along resources related to the day. So you have access to the map, and we'll do some video recordings to help you understand how to use that map. as a resource. So yeah, even if you're not able to be there presently, physically on that day, still let us know or sign up and you'll still get access to all of the resources.
Houston, someone asked, when does the early bird end?
Yeah, it is. It's a great question. In fact, why don't we just visit the page together right now?
Do that. And as they're doing that, Houston, as you're going there, sorry, I thought it was like top of mind. There's a couple questions in the chat. One was, is the multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS, this was early on, but it says now a shift in the paradigm, or is it an added angle to RTI, Maslow's, and academic learning? Love that deep question. Here's the answer. We work with Dr. Clayton Cook, who's an expert in MTSS. It's an evolution of the public health model and RTI, and involves a way of organizing and delivering a continuum of care to meet the diverse needs of students. That's straight from Dr. Cook, who was kind of tuning in today and saw that question come in.
Nice.
Did we get the date?
Yep, it's right here. I hope you can see it on my screen here. It's 5 days before. As long as you register 5 days before, that cost, that early bird discount, is true for you. So this link, of course, is in the chat. So grateful for all of you joining today. Looking forward to sharing this full roadmap with you. This has been a labor of love for me. Before I started working in schools, I did design and user interface. And so this has been like an exercise in creativity and purpose for me and the whole team to start to pull some of this work together. So I'm super thrilled that we get to share this with you. We're going to keep digging in. We're going to build out this entire map with a robust library of tools that you can use to make sure that we're putting that critical focus where it matters as we return with some new normals. Thank you all for being here today. John, always good to see your face. Thanks for answering the questions. And we look forward to seeing you on Friday. We have a curriculum walkthrough if you're interested in our secondary advisory curriculum. And the final thing, today, 4 p.m. on Twitter, you can follow us, join us in the Character Strong #CS chat. And the final link that Krista will drop into the chat is a link to our Facebook educator group, where all kinds of educators from around the country and world connect around social emotional learning, character development, and building relationships. She's just dropped it into the chat. So go ahead and join us on Facebook, join us on Twitter, wherever you want to be. We spend lots of time there hanging out with y'all. It's been meaningful to spend some more time with you today. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you very soon.